On July 15th, 2015, a commercial diver was dragged with such terrifying force through a 17-inch opening beneath the surface. What was supposed to be a standard underwater inspection spiraled into a real-life horror story, and what happened next was nothing short of horrific. Luke Seabrook was 39 years old. He was working at the Annapolis Tidal Generating Station along the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. Now, Luke, he's a very experienced technician. He was assigned to dive into the reservoir of Fundy Bay. Now, his task was to basically go down and examine a sluice gate. Now, a sluice gate, it's a massive structure. It's responsible for regulating the dam's water levels. But during what should have been just another routine descent, just another everyday dive, to him, everything went catastrophically wrong. Now, Luke, he was a certified commercial diver and he was employed by Paul's Diving Services. This is a company hired by Nova Scotia Power to basically perform maintenance work at the stations, keep everything up to date, fix anything that's broken, and just simple maintenance. Now, like all commercial divers, Luke, he depended entirely on a full-faced helmet. Now, this helmet, it's connected to a surface supplied umbilical line. That line is his lifeline. It delivers breathing gas, it transmits live video, and basically it allows for constant communication with the team at the surface. Now, in an emergency, that same line could be used to physically pull him back up to safety from down underneath. Now, Luke had completed inspections at the station before. He's done it quite a few times. So it was just another dive to him. But this dive, it would be different. Now, commercial diving is considered one of the deadliest professions in the world. And that's why the industry, there's very strict safety protocols, and that's why they exist. Now, before every dive, crews are supposed to receive hazard briefings, which basically they're specific to each dive. They're specific to each site. Now, this involves going over operational status of equipment, a written dive plan, and most critically, clear warnings about water flow conditions. While Luke did receive some basic guidance, Paul's Diving Services failed to provide a formal dive plan for this. Now, as a result, crucial information was never clearly established. Now, one of the most important, which is discussing how the sluice gate's position was actually verified, or how the constant changing tides could actually, impact conditions underwater. Now, that omission was especially dangerous at the Annapolis station. Even when things appeared calm and looked like things are going to go great, unpredictable currents were very common, and especially in this bay. Now, normally, divers, they rely on a 5-hour slack tide window, which is the industry recommended safe period between tidal shifts. Basically, this is where you look at the tides, you look at incoming and outgoing tides, and basically you evaluate risk and determine when is the best time and when is the safest time to dive. Now, you normally want to schedule the dive during an incoming tide so that you're not getting pushed into the gate, so that the gate, all that water is not trying to suck you in. But this inspection, for whatever reason, was scheduled during an outgoing tide when water movement it's at its most unstable. So in other words, Luke was sent down at the worst possible moment. Now, even if the sluice gate was technically closed, pressure and flow could change instantly, and that's why it's so dangerous. It makes breathing very difficult. It creates deadly hazards like exposed cables, metal edges, and debris. Now, none of these risks were communicated with the dive team. So shortly before Luke went into the water and swam down, this was around midday, plant operators, they closed the sluice gate. These gates are just massive steel barriers, and they're designed to control the movement of just millions of gallons of water flowing in and out of these power stations. Now, the control system was locked out, and sensors, they indicated that the gate had actually sealed properly, that there were no issues. But there was a big problem. No one at the station actually performed a visual inspection of the gate. A visual inspection is one of the most critical inspections of any dive. Instead, they allowed gravity to lower it, then they basically just walked along top and they were just pulling cables by hand. So they were basically, when they pull these cables, they're simply checking for slack, and if there's no slack, then they assume that the gate was fully closed. So that assumption, that was their biggest mistake, because in reality, there was about a 12 to 18 inch gap between the bottom of the reservoir gate and the river floor. Now, on top of that, the crew, once again, they skipped the standard safety step, which is known as a bag test. This is where you take a 5-pound sandbag, you lower it, and it's lowered and raised across the dam. And what this does is it's designed to detect unseen underwater hazards. Now, this test, it exists for a reason. What it does is it reveals what's truly happening beneath the calm-looking water. Now, one of the most lethal threats in commercial diving is something called differential pressure. Now, this is often referred to as delta P. Now, delta P occurs when water levels on either side of a barrier aren't equal. When they aren't equal, the imbalance creates an invisible force that relentlessly is constantly just searching for any opening so that it can equalize the pressure. Now, at tidal power stations like Annapolis, delta P, it's at its strongest during tidal transitions and when massive water level differences form just a powerful underwater vacuum. It's basically just trying to suck anything that's around right through the gate. Now, because of the specific location, once again, Annapolis, the danger was just magnified. Fundy Bay experiences the highest tides on Earth, with vertical changes reaching about 52 feet. Now, in conditions like these, even the smallest opening of a gate can become an unstoppable drain capable of pulling anything nearby right through it with crushing force. Now, Luke had no idea that any of this was happening while he was literally descending down toward the gate. The tide was receding and he had no idea. Now, without warning, the moment that Luke approached the structure, the suction literally, it just grabbed him and ripped him toward the bottom of the reservoir. Now, he couldn't fight the current. Nobody can. It's too strong. Once he realized this and he realized that, hey, I'm being overpowered, Luke basically, he radioed the surface crew and told them what's going on and said, pull me up. Then his communications were lost. They just abruptly went silent. Now, on the surface, panic began to set in amongst the crew members, amongst his teammates. Now, because of this, Luke's backup diver and supervisor basically grabbed his umbilical line and pulled it up with everything that he had for several minutes. But as he was doing this, desperately trying to haul him back up, the tidal suction was just too strong. It was too strong. He couldn't do it. Even when everybody started pulling together, they just couldn't pull him up. When it became clear that they couldn't pull him up, they basically said, look, we need to secure the line to a fixed structure to prevent it from pulling him down even further, and immediately called emergency services, all while trying to restore communications. Now, below the surface, Luke was fighting for his life. Just seconds after his final radio transmission, the pressure had yanked him straight into the narrow opening beneath the gate. But instead of passing through, his helmet literally got stuck on the gate. It slammed into the steel and it was just stuck there, pinned by the merciless force of the differential pressure. Now, the impact was so violent that it fractured two of his ribs instantly. And the nightmare was far from over. The vacuum force tore at his gear, pulling his helmet and suit apart. Now, what this did was it's exposing his mouth while millions of gallons of water are just thundering past him through the gate. Now, as the pressure was twisting and putting his body in unnatural contortions, Luke, he began to lose consciousness. Now, at one point, the backup diver, they attempted to jump in to reach him to try to save him. But the team immediately stopped them from doing that because they're terrified. There's already an emergency with Luke, and they just didn't want the supervisor who was going to jump in to help him basically end up in the same trap, the same situation. Now they have two people they have to rescue. So basically, with no way to intervene, the crew was simply forced to just sit there and wait. I couldn't imagine just sitting there, but you can't do anything. They could do nothing except just hope that the water level balance out, that it just equalizes pressure. Now, while paramedics prepared above for what they feared was the inevitable, after approximately 45 minutes, the pressure finally balanced out just enough for rescuers to descend to try to save Luke. Now, when they reached Luke, they immediately noticed severe damage to his suit, and they believed that he had taken on water. However, his umbilical line, it was actually still connected. It gave him hope that he may regain consciousness. Now, paramedics worked on Luke for about 20 minutes. They were just attempting to resuscitate him, but they were unsuccessful. Now, the following day, on July 16th, officials, they shut down the dam to basically start their investigation to figure out what went wrong. Paul's diving services ultimately pleaded guilty to 4 charges related to this incident. Now, the company, they were ordered to deliver 15 safety presentations and pay just $34,000 in fines and donations to a workplace safety education fund. Now, later, the company, believe it or not, they tried to go back to withdraw their guilty plea. Now, that appeal was denied. Now, despite operating the facility, Nova Scotia Power, they faced no charges whatsoever. Now, the Annapolis Tidal Generating Station was permanently decommissioned in 2019, and while some safety improvements were made, ongoing calls for stronger regulations and oversight continue till this very day. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, make sure you're subscribed. It really does make a difference, and thank you once again for helping us grow.